Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Scheduled meeting on May 2nd, 2024. I'm Joey Hargis, the Metro Zoning Administrator, and I'll present the cases for the Codes Department on the wall here by means of a PowerPoint. I'll dispense from reading individual sections of the zoning code unless somebody wants me to read sections of the zoning code. The procedure will be to go through all the cases set for public hearing today. The board will discuss and then vote on the cases in front of you. Board's vested to act on cases as outlined in section 1740-180 of the Metro Code of Law. The code requires that 4 members of the 7-member board be present to constitute a quorum. We've got 5 here, so you'll need 4 out of these 5 individuals' votes in favor of your case to be approved. If by some chance we have a vote of 3-2 or 2-3, recommend in favor of your case will stay on our agenda for the next 30 days. The members that participate are allowed to change their vote. The 6th member who's not present could watch the proceedings on our YouTube channel and become eligible to participate at our next hearing. In 30 days, we will have just 1 meeting. So we'll have 1 meeting within 30 days. So that would be on 5/16. That'll be here, I believe, in this room. But the board, during the testimony, I'll go first and I'll present the Codes Department the facts and what's in front of the board today. And then I'll call for the applicant to come forward. Just to your right of the 4 seats that are directly in front of you or where you'll come to testify. To your right in front of Ms. Davis, will be a time clock that I'll keep in cases with opposition, like the one case we mentioned. Each side of the case will have 10 minutes to present their case, so the applicant will have 10 minutes in total. The applicant may want to save part of that 10 minutes for rebuttal, and then the opposition will come up and speak, and you'll have 10 minutes as a group. So it's not 10 minutes per speaker, but it's 10 minutes as one side of the case. So if you've got multiple folks that want to talk, if you guys will work out your time accordingly. The clock will run during testimony. It will stop for any questions that the board asks of you and your answers to the board's questions. Once I feel you've gotten back into testimony, I'll start that clock right back up. Should be noted that if anyone's found to present false or misleading testimony to this board that affects this board's decision, and approval can be revoked later by means of a show cause hearing. Madam Chair, we've got, and the board does allow elected officials to address the board. Are there any elected representatives present today? Good. Hi, Councilmember. Good to see you. Okay. You want to wait till your case is coming up? Which case were you here for? Oh, actually, thank you. You're perfect segue. Actually, we've had a request by the Islamic Center to postpone their case to June the 6th. The board directed them to have a neighborhood meeting. They have not done so. In talking with their representatives, they have reached out to individual members, but they haven't held a neighborhood meeting. And so I've advised them, we're not going to hear it until you do. So they are tentatively scheduled for June 6th, Councilmember. And I apologize. That is a very late development this morning. So thank you much. So the council members' remarks actually are a perfect segue for some preliminary announcements. Let me get those out of the way first. These are cases that will be postponed or withdrawn and will not be heard today. So the first case is a postponement on the front of our agenda, case 2024-19, the Islamic Center of Nashville. It's postponed until the meeting of June the 6th. And that'll be at 1 p.m. The next case that has been postponed is near the back of our agenda. It's case 64, 2024-64. Hines was the appellant. This is the multiple properties over off Broadway and Church Street and Hay Street. That'll be postponed until June the 6th as well. So those 2 cases will not be heard today. So if you're here for either of those, you're free to leave. We'll see you on the 6th. I do want to let you know that the board does have a consent agenda. So the board, prior to today's hearing, reviews the cases, and if in their opinion the cases meet the criteria for which they've applied, the board members recommend the case to the remainder of the board for consent. And I'll read into those again, and I know some people have come and gone, so I'm going to ask again of these cases on consent. If you're here in opposition to any of the cases that I call next, raise your hand, please. The first case recommended for the consent agenda today is case 2024-55, Mr. Benjamin Jones, owners of the property located at 929 Davidson, requesting a variance in the street setback to construct a new covered front porch and terrace. Are there any parties present opposed to case 55? Okay, seeing none, is the applicant present as well? Okay. Mr. Jones, the board's recommending approval. The one condition that this board will place on that, and I think you and I talked at the site, that's you're going to remain this open air. It won't be enclosed, and you're agreeable to that condition. So that case is recommended for consent. The next case recommended for consent is case 2024-61, Victor Coleman, 4249 Kings Lane, requesting a variance in the maximum building coverage in RS District and a contextual overlay. This is actually an enclosure or a roofing of an existing deck that's located to the back of the property, with the condition that it not be enclosed or heated and cooled. I've talked to Mr. and Ms. Coleman. They are agreeable to that condition. Are there any parties besides the Colemans present for case 61 on Kings Lane? Okay, seeing none. Next case recommended for consent is case 2024-62, Jonathan Murray, Urban Housing Solutions owner, property at 701 Porter Road. This is in addition to a non-conforming use. The applicant's requesting to construct a cover over existing deck for a restaurant that's located on that property. Are there any parties here in opposition to case 62? I'm chairing seeing no one, and that is your consent agenda for today that are recommended. And again, just recapping cases 55, 61, 55 with conditions, 61 with conditions, 62, and that is it.
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda with conditions identified by the zoning administrator.
Any seconds on the motion?
A second.
There's a second. There's a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
I don't see any opposed, so that's approved 5-0.
Okay, if you're here for cases 55, 61, 62, you are free to go. I'll, as always, extend the courtesy of you can stay with us and watch all the other cases, but you are free to go. For those that have permits pending, just get back with the Codes Department on Monday and follow up the next needed steps to obtain your permits, and they'll get with you. Chair, if you give me just a moment, I will pull up and begin our first case that will be heard today, which will be case 2024-40. Mr. Amos Howard Sr. is the appellant, 601 11th South Trust, owner of the property located at 601 South 11th Street. This is a request, an item D appeal in the RS5 district. The applicant seeking to construct, I'm going to correct the agenda here. This is in addition to a non-conforming triplex, not to construct a new triplex. There was some confusion between the applicants and us. They are going to keep the existing structures, the four walls. They are going to put additions upon that, and I'll show you in the presentation what's occurring. This board's empowered has jurisdiction over it under section 1740-180 item D and section 1740-650D. To remind the board members, the standard of review here is whether the board finds that this addition under 1740-180 is what it allows for the board to approve, determine the appropriateness of proposed changes to non-conforming uses or structures. So that's your standard of review is appropriateness. This was postponed from the meeting of March 21st, 2024. Let me. As I called for at the beginning, there are no parties opposed to the case. So this is the subject property upon my visit to the site. I apologize. I've got PowerPoint asking me if I want to try subtitles. I do not. And it did it anyway. Okay. Okay. This is a site plan submitted by the appellants in this case. The notations, we had some discussions with the applicant, and part of the deferral request on March 21st was for me and the applicant to kind of discuss through the state law and what protects non-conforming uses. Just for your purposes, three-family, multifamily uses and above, so three families and up, are protected in residential zone districts, but only for involuntary damage, not for voluntary damage. Our code allows you to come to this board and seek approval to put additions on non-conforming structures, non-conforming residential structures, not otherwise protected by state law, so long as no more than 50% of the structure is damaged or destroyed by voluntary means. So the initial drawing that you saw here said foundation, which raised alarms for me. We're taking this building all the way down. They have since revised their plans. They are going to keep the exterior walls of the existing triplex there and then put the proposed addition on, which you see. And I'll show you some elevations of the drawing here in just a moment. This is a view. Oh, there we go. That's the house itself. I got my slides out of sequence. And then these are the homes to either side on the left and right. And while you're doing that, I'm going to pull up the drawings and I'll insert the elevations that they've submitted since we've done. But there is no opposition present. Sir, if you'll identify yourself for the board, name and address, and provide that. And if you'll just kind of pause for a minute, I'll get your drawings in front of the board so they can see those as well.
If you could, sir, if you could turn your microphone on so the.
There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Josh King. I'm representing Reverend Amos Howard on this project. He unfortunately had other business that took him out of town this morning. My address.
Excuse me, you'll have to give us an address as well.
My address is 105 LeBar Drive in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Okay. And as Joey eloquently explained, our intention is to significantly rehab the existing structure and add an addition to the rear of it to create to modernize the existing triplex, bring the existing structure, which was constructed between the 40s and the 1980s, up to modern code, provide modern conveniences like in-unit washer and dryer, modern electrical, and the like, and also add an addition to the rear to help create a little bit more elbow room within that existing structure. We are keeping the foundation, all four walls, be making repairs as needed to the existing structure to stay in conformity with Metro zoning and TCA. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is it currently being used as a triplex?
Yes, all three units are currently occupied, and I don't know what the plan is for the existing three tenants. We have probably a couple months ahead of us of permitting, should this board grant the appeal.
And the floor area ratio is not changing.
We are demolishing.
Well, sorry, it's not exceeding the current base zoning.
Not as planned. Again, we still have to go through the full permitting process, but our intention is to stay well below the maximum FAR ratio.
Thanks.
And interesting enough, Mr. Bradford, the zoning code, and I don't know why our section says that. In residential zones, there is no such thing as an FAR for 1 and 2 family or 3 family dwellings, but we do a building coverage analysis, and they will comply with the building coverage. Even though code says floor area, I've kind of equated that in the residential to be building coverage, so they will comply with that portion.
Got it.
And I'm currently pulling up a floor plan and the elevation from the west side for you to view. So in this case, the existing home here are going to renovate, take the roof, make some changes here, I believe, Mr. King, and then add on with a 2-story addition back for to create that third unit. So they're basically moving one of the units out of this portion of the building back here. And as Mr. King modernize the whole.
Yes, the 2-story addition in the back is set back off of the road So from the road, the building is not going to change significantly from what's originally there. And there are other two-story buildings within one or two houses of this, of the proposed site here.
I have a clarification question. So it's currently operating as a triplex,
Correct.
and then what's the intended use after the renovation?
Triplex.
So why are there, maybe I'm misreading the plans, but I'm reading kind of 4 living spaces, 4 kitchens. It looks like the addition has 2 units on it. And then the letter from the neighbor also mentions she's concerned about an additional unit on top of the triplex. So if this is what's Joey's showing right now is the main floor, unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, and then if you clip over to the next one, which is the second story in the rear.
I can tell you, Mr. Ransom, we cannot approve a 4th unit, and I know the applicant's aware of that too. Can't expand this, we can't increase the degree of nonconformity to create a 4th unit, but here, I'll
Right, that's why my concern, I see 4 kitchens, 4 living spaces. Then the neighbor expressed concern about adding an additional unit on top of the triplex.
Yeah, I think the issue is, I think that would be like legally void if we like even tried to do something like that. I don't think we even have the authority to.
No, I'm not
Yeah.
advocating for the
Oh, yeah.
additional unit. I'm saying
Right.
it's what he's showing doesn't represent for whatever reason.
I
It's on
did,
page A2, Joey. There it is, yeah. That's the second story of the rear addition. So it has its own bedroom, own kitchen, own cooking range, what have you.
we will have the plans revised to remove the second kitchen from the additional from the rear unit, not the additional, from the rear unit that we're planning on. I did not catch that under an initial quick review of the plans from the architect.
And removal of the range plug for us, Mr. Ransom, and members of the board will negate dwelling unit under our code.
Even though you have an entry foyer when you walk in,
It can, they do have connectivity between the first floor and the second floor coming in, down at the bottom. But as long as I can get from upstairs and downstairs without, without going outdoors, I can reach it all. But we'll double check that the floor plans reflect full connectivity between 2 and no cooking on the second floor.
right, I guess I just, maybe it's the cynical side of me, but
I understand.
creating a situation that's easily renovatable afterwards, adding 2 units and not having the appropriate fire ratings and everything else, and also being out of code. I mean, the applicant's representing, he's coming, this would be essentially the first, your best step forward here, and you're presenting a 4th unit upstairs. There's no reason you need to, I guess.
We will, with this board's permission, when we go through the codes process, we will ensure that the rear unit is one contiguous unit and not easily subdividable into 2 separate units. And Joey's staff is very diligent in their reviews to ensure that that is in compliance.
You're nice to say diligent. I've heard other not as nice words from contractors when we catch things like that.
Are there any additional questions before we close the public hearing and we discuss? Okay, if you don't mind staying there, because we might need to reopen for, if there are other things that come up. But, so we'll close the public hearing. I was going to suggest to the board that perhaps we have this case deferred because there are some questions, and that would give the applicant some time to work on an alternative plan for our members to review.
I think that's a good idea, because the simple removal of a range upstairs doesn't take away it's the sum of all things. It's clearly a separate apartment the way it's currently designed. It's not like a simple miss by the architect. At least that's my read of it. It may not be a bad idea.
See any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, I have no issue with it. I mean, I think that in terms of the expansion, that I'm fairly satisfied on the question of like that a new triplex wouldn't expand the degree of nonconformity here, but because of the plan issue, I get I don't feel strongly in either direction. So
I may seem a little fired up today just because I've seen a few things that we've approved lately that aren't exactly what we approved. Form and function, setbacks and heights they are, but what's represented to us to what's being built is not the same. So maybe why you detect me being a little curt today, but I think a deferral may not be a bad idea.
I will open the public hearing if you don't mind to ask the appellant. I think we might recommend a deferral here. Just wanted your thought on that.
Would a condition of approval of removing the entire kitchen apparatus from the second story of the rear addition satisfy the concerns that you have?
It doesn't appear.
It wouldn't satisfy mine.
My colleague, it doesn't
Yeah.
appear that would, so just wanted to give you a chance to comment.
And part of the discussion as far as future dates would be 5/16 or 6/6 are our next two meetings.
Would you have a preference?
I would prefer my client be here so I can clear this with him.
That would be I think why a deferral would be, that's why I'm suggesting, we'll see how the board votes, but.
If the board chooses if the board chooses to move forward with a deferral, we would ask to be on the 6/6 agenda.
June 6th. Okay.
June 6th, yes.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing again. Is there any more discussions or any motions? Okay, then I will make a motion to defer the case to June 6th. Any
I
seconds?
second.
Okay, we'll take a vote now. There's a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye, raise your hand. Aye. So that's 4, that's 5, that's approved 5-0. So we'll see you on June 6th.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, our next case, the board will hear is case 2024-42. Clear Blue Company is the appellant, Born Again Church, owner of the property at 858 West Trinity Lane, requesting variances in height, sky plane, and street setback. The parking variance is withdrawn by staff. They've shown a plan modification that complies with the code, so we're withdrawing that one. But we will have street setback and height and sky plane. It's a little bit one's function of the other. The appellant is seeking to construct a senior multifamily housing community referred to the board under section 1712-020B. The references for special exceptions in 1760 are withdrawn as well. And are there any parties present opposed to the case? Mr. Chair, seeing none, I believe you've got some handouts coming to you. I've got some preliminary stuff I want to cover before I start in the presentation. This particular use was approved by me under a grant of reasonable accommodation for the Born Again Church to allow for a multifamily senior housing development. And I did so initially. Let me get the dates of my letter of grant. As you may or may not know, the council later after this grant required a requirement of my office to notify adjoining property owners within 1,000 feet, send a copy of my letter, prescribe to them the ability to appeal should they wish to. When this notification and subsequent revision happened prior to that council meeting. But let me just read to you a little bit, give you an idea. So my initial grant was more conceptual in nature. We did not have a plan that laid out building form and such, but the grant of the RLUPA reasonable accommodation does not alleviate the burden of the applicants who are before you today or any other future applicants. They do have to still comply with the regular zoning regulations. And if they don't, they can come here and seek a variance request, and that's what's going on here. But the grant of the reasonable accommodation and subsequent amendment was December 6th of last year. And I said, the purpose of this letter was to clarify my original grant of reasonable accommodation approved only for the use of senior affordability and workforce housing, with a footnote of, you have to modify, you have to make sure you meet the workforce housing definition in the code. And that housing would include on-site services such as health clinic, doctor's office, nurse station, pharmacy, barber, nail salon, exercise facility, and other similar related health amenities. Let's see here. And that all of those are for the exclusive use of the residents, meaning it's not intended to be a multifamily development and with outside folks coming here. So I think somewhere, but the accommodation, however, and my letter says, did not include other commercial uses such as retail, restaurants, bars, and markets. There had been, I think, some rumblings in the community that it was opening the door effectively rezoning. So I wanted to get that on the record. I sent the applicants that modification to that. I know that's really not in front of you here, and hopefully I'm not intending to muddy the waters, but I think in some of the documentation that may have came in mentioned RLUPA, and that only handled the use chart part of the zoning code. So they're before you over the bulk regulations, and they have initially sent in a site plan that had additional variances on here. ISR, I think, was one, parking. Those have been modified to reflect compliance with the code. So let me pull up. Now we'll get into the gist of our presentation. Again, we didn't have anyone in opposition, so this is the case located. If you're familiar with West Trinity Lane, we're west of Brick Church Pike. Where's my cursor? There we go. If you're familiar with the Born Again Church on Trinity Lane is located, their site, they do own all these parcels that you see here. These lots will be combined into a single unified parcel. Across the street used to be Abernathy's junkyard, for lack of a better term. That has since been, they're gone, and there's new construction you'll see that's occurring across the street. But their proposal is to build the structures which you see here in yellow on the site plan and associated parking, along with the drive aisle that ties in to the existing egress ramp on Trinity Lane. No additional egress is coming here. There may be some fire code required egress on the west side of the property. But so the variances in front of you in this R6 district, they're required to meet for non-residential uses or multifamily residential uses a required street setback of 40 feet. They're requesting to be at 20, and that 20 would be at these leading edges of those two buildings. And inside the zoning code in Table B for multifamily and non-residential uses in residential zoning, it sets a maximum height at the setback line of 20 feet with a 2-to-1 vertical to horizontal sky plane. So for every foot I come back off that 40 foot, I get to go up 2 more feet to 22 feet and vice versa. But their request is to be 66 feet at that 20-foot mark. Again, a view of the site plan as submitted, and then I've got some elevations for you. These elevations are of buildings along this bottom one is the north elevation. This will be, I believe, the elevation facing Trinity Lane. Is that correct? Okay. And then the next photographs are other parts of the building. The sky plane portions would be those portions that encroach into the initial 20 foot of that building. Actually, let me go here. So the first 20 feet of this building here would be where that sky plane penetration is occurring in the street setback violation. The vast majority of the structures do comply with the setback. And then some additional views. I believe these are internal. Again, a view, upper left photograph, this is the Born Again Church that's been out there for all my adult life on Trinity Lane. And then a view of the subject site is currently a wooded parcel to the immediate west. So not much to see on the subject site. And then across the road, remember I talked about the old Abernathy lot. It's going away. And then give you some idea about more recent aerial photographs shot in March of this year, just a month and a half ago. There's the existing church. The subject site will be sitting right here. that is what we have. And I'm happy to turn to any pages that the applicants might need. Again, if you'll identify yourselves, there's a little button just to the right of the microphone stand. Just press that button one time, the light will turn red. If for some reason members, the folks from Metro 3, if we get blinking lights on our microphones, we're going to have to shut down the meeting for just a few minutes while they reboot the system. So if we see that happen. But the best way I was told was to avoid hitting that button more than once real quick. So, all right, with that, I'll turn it over to you, Miss, and the gentleman at the table, you'll have 5 minutes, just double checking. Again, there's no opposition present. Seeing none, you'll have 5 minutes to present your testimony.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Horn, and my address is 2020 Lindell Avenue, Studio 11, Nashville, Tennessee, 37203. I am the partner and founding manager of Urban Campus and Core. We are the co-developer on this application with Clear Blue Company, who is our co-developer on this site. We work primarily with institutional landowners like churches, nonprofit organizations, universities, and schools to activate land assets to solve community needs. So in this context, we were solving the need of active senior housing in a community where residents are being displaced. So the proposed project is to construct 254 active senior housing units. This is a demographic that's traditionally been left out of senior housing because typically it's for very low income seniors. So those who are on restricted incomes and are looking for a place that's safe and welcoming. We're trying to achieve the same thing, but for those who are working in the workforce. This is a 55 plus community. So these are people who are typically working into their 80s, especially in disadvantaged communities. And so we're looking to preserve housing for them. I'll turn it over to the subject matter experts on the specifics around our exception request, and I will turn off my light without clicking twice to avoid issues.
Hello, my name is Chad Jones. I'm with STG Design. Our address is 211 Union, Suite 103. So we're the architects on this project, and to talk a little bit about the architecture, the exterior design and material are basically reflecting what's already there in the community. On the second page of the handout I gave you, there's a rendering, and we have masonry and fiber cement board on the building. And, we're looking for this site right here, represented by the church, is to create a campus feel, a campus effect, including this new multifamily project. So, with the special exception, we are looking to be at the corners of Building A and Building C, around approximately 20 feet off of the property line. And at those heights on Building A and Building C should be approximately 55 feet. The 66 is on Building B, which is set back a little bit more than 20. I would assume at that worst case scenario on the east corner is more like 40.
While you're taking a brief break, it doesn't seem that the clock is moving.
So, our design and the layout of the plan basically reflects a campus feel. So we utilize the existing entrances into the site to access the property or the new development. And that access road is, it goes all the way through to Roy Street, which is off on the side for emergency access. There is a piece of land that's kind of south of the building, which is still part of the campus and the church's property. They plan on using that for future development. One of their thoughts is to build an addition to the sanctuary. So that's part of maybe a parking plan or something like that. It hasn't been decided yet.
Is the property that is sort of I guess off of Roy Street, just below that back parking, is that private residential property? Okay.
It is.
Got it. Thank you.
And if I can ask another question, I
Yes.
do better with graphics and visuals rather than the spoken word.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm not sure that I understand really the variance request. Like, it's written as setback, variance in height and sky plane, and I'm looking for that on these drawings, but I'm not seeing it. So, yeah, I kind of need some help there understanding the request.
Yeah, so I believe the area in question is at the front or Trinity Lane facing portions of Building A and Building C, where it encroaches into that 40-foot, it encroaches into that 40-foot setback that's required.
And
And
then
we're
how much
asking
does
it-
it encroach into the required setback?
So right now, it is a 20-foot setback, so those corners encroach 20 feet in.
Corners, okay.
Of the Trinity Lane facing faces of the building of Building C and Building A. And the two sides, the legs of the H, so to speak, or,
So the building that's running more horizontally parallel to Trinity Lane, that's that's behind the 40 feet? It's
Yes.
just, where is that in relation to the 40 feet? Is it behind the 40 feet or
it's like right at 40
right
feet.
at 40
Yeah,
feet? Okay, so we have the bars protrude into the setback.
that's correct.
Okay.
And some of that is because of the shape of Trinity Lane, so to speak, how it curves in or dips in at that one point, and the position of the building.
And then the height and sky plane,
So the height at Building B is 66, and the height at Building A and C, which are 55.
and the requirement is,
It is, I think 3 stories is the limit, and right now we're at 5/4. 5/4 split on Building A and Building C.
Yeah, so at that setback line of 40, they're allowed 20 feet. And then it's a 2-for-1 slope as you step back away from 20.
So basically, at 40, they're allowed 20, and they're asking us for 66 at 20.
Yes.
So they're looking to cut the setback in half, and at that setback also increase the height 3x.
It's-
Instead of 40-foot setback, 20 max height, 20-foot setback, 66 height on the corners for the two, just for clarification. That's right?
Yes, that's correct.
And some of our precedent also came from the SP that is across the street that has, I think, 5 stories.
This is maybe just a question for Joey and Ann. So I get that we have like 2 requests in front of us, a special exception due to RLUPA, and then the variance
No,
request.
there is no special exception here.
Okay,
for
because
this.
okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I meant to clarify that at the beginning. No, I apologize for that. Ms. Davis.
RLUPA, the religious land.
do you have any additional, go ahead.
My name is Travis Todd with Thomas and Hutton Engineering, 500 11th Avenue North, Suite 800. I'll add a little bit to this. Part of the reason we're pushing this building up to West Trinity Lane is because of the area that the church wants to reserve for future use for their own uses. We know the policy being T4RC right here. This is the form that's being called for along West Trinity Lane. As Chad mentioned, the SP across the street is very similar in nature, allowing 5 stories and
But they got
65
an SP.
feet.
Why didn't you guys rezone it? That's the question I'm big in my head. Why didn't not rezone it then? Like, why do it this way? Because they rezoned it to SP. What's the reason just to keep the base zoning and then go through all these variances?
Because of the RLUPA, as you mentioned, the campus is being combined into one campus, and the church is a partner in it. And so this was the path after we consulted with multiple parties to go versus going through a traditional rezoning effort.
Okay.
And just to continue briefly, that's why we kind of pushed this up to West Trinity, is to preserve that space and looking at the surrounding development patterns where West Trinity is headed. per the policy plan, is really what drove this site plan, just so you kind of understand why we're addressing West Trinity the way we are with that building form.
Any additional comments you'd like to make? And I'll ask if there are any additional questions. I might have one here.
Really, I guess what's the hardship? What's the reason you need the variance for height and setback?
I'll speak to that. It's mainly the reasons I mentioned in master planning the site with the church, their desire to want to retain as much usable land for their own uses in the future. As Chad mentioned, possibility of expanding the sanctuary or building some sort of community hall for church functions in this and the rest of this land. And so that's why we, pushed as far north as we could on the site. I think, the underlying zoning being R8, that's obviously pretty low density and the requirements that come with that. We do feel like the plan is in line with the policy plan for the area, and we've had, quite a few conversations with planning regarding that. And they've even mentioned the SP across the street and kind of the height and how this, relates well to that. So those are the main reasons. We're just trying to preserve the rest of that land versus complying with an R8 regulation that would really kind of push this really far back into the site and kind of eat up that usable area for future use.
Okay, you said you spoke to planning?
We have.
Is there a letter in here from planning that I missed?
Wouldn't be in this case since it's a variance
That's
request.
what
Yes, sir.
I figured as much, but I just figured it might be as an addendum or something you had. Development question. What if you flipped and the service drive went along Trinity Lane? You'd end up with the same number of units, everything else. You'd push you're asking for a lot, right? You're cutting the setback in half and 3xing the height, right? And I know there's other developments around it, but I don't have all that stuff in front of me. I'm just going off what you've presented. So is there any reason you can flip the service drive along?
It's possible. I think it's a character of the development issue, not wanting to front West Trinity with another road, but kind of more looking at what the policy wants to see here. This is more in line with that.
Okay.
Being pretty familiar with this neighborhood, that area is pretty hilly, right? So can you speak to, I guess, the elevation of the street in comparison to your property? Is it sloping back down? Like, what's happening in all those trees and everything else?
Sure. So the high point of West Trinity is really kind of where building A is. If you look at the first page on your handout, I know the text is a little bit small. That's building A on the left. That's the high point of West Trinity, and then it slopes down as you head east toward the church entrance. If you look at the rendering on the second page of your handout, you're looking, that building in the foreground on the right side of the page is the high point of West Trinity, and as West Trinity drops, so does the building. So the buildings step down as West Trinity steps down. So we're kind of following that height down the hill.
And sorry, just you have any other questions?
No, I don't. Just trying to understand in relation to the site.
I guess the other question I have, building A and building C, which I guess are the two side ones, right? You're saying those encroach, you're trying to essentially ask for a variance for those to get up to 20-foot setback at 66 feet tall, right?
Building A and Building B are 55 feet.
At 55, so A is 55 at a 20-foot setback. Building B is 55 at a 40-foot setback. And what about building C?
A is 55 at a 20, B is 66 at a 40, and C is 55 at a 20.
So the middle one is 66.
That is correct.
And there's, it's tough to tell, from the rendering and not having to go to Joe's point, I guess, assuming, in theory, you'd walk out of building A and you could essentially walk straight to the street. There's no, building A is not compressed in the ground. There's no retaining wall or anything, right?
There is, it happens in the middle of the building. So at that building A steps down from one side to the other. And so the lower side addresses West Trinity Lane. So if you notice on the site plan on page 1 of your handout, we do have a sidewalk connection out. And the same thing occurs on the east side of building C. You're at grade with West Trinity and can walk straight out to the public sidewalk there.
I see that, okay.
Mm-hmm. So we tried to stair step this to match the road as much as possible so that you're not seeing kind of high retaining walls and, things like that as you drive or walk down that corridor.
Okay.
Okay, any additional questions or? No? Okay, do you want to ask them now or wait until? Okay. Any comments on your side before we close the public hearing? Okay, I'll just stay there. And any comments?
I think my question is for Joey and Ann. So typically, whenever we have like a religious institution doing a development, we hear, like, even the most recent ones I'm thinking about, there's a rationale connected to like the religious practice or connected to the business of the church. And here, other than the church owns the property and this is a good thing to do, I don't understand, just because the church owns the property and they want to use the other part of the property in the future, how that connects to RLUIPA. So again, that was just wanted to flesh that out, because otherwise this is just like a bunch of variants as like a lot of them. And so that's what I wanted to clear in my mind.
Sure.
I was gonna ask, can we just reopen that to ask them maybe? I don't know.
I know, but this isn't a special exception, so
Right.
there wasn't a meeting and this isn't being presented to us as a religious institution. This is being presented to us as a variance.
Isn't the reasonable
Yeah.
accommodation the thing that you determine based upon the use component of it?
Okay,
Yeah,
that's what I wanted
The
to
reasonable,
flesh out.
and kind of a little bit at the beginning, the reasonable accommodation is the process that the church went by reaching out to me, and they had to explain the factors of how this is in the church's mission to be able to do the use. And that was the first part I covered, to send out the letter.
And I saw your letter.
Yeah,
That's what I wanted to
yeah, that's the grant of the use, and I'm I believe that this is the church's mission, to provide housing for seniors as part of their community outreach and their service as a church. So that aspect of it is not in front of you, but that was to give you the full picture. The initial come in was, well, you're just like any other developer. You're developing this, and they're like, no, here's, so they had to provide information to me.
And I
which-
saw your letter. I just wanted to make sure, because on our packet it said special exception, but then
It
it
is.
said variance, so I got confused.
Yeah, and I
just wanted
apologize for that.
No, I just wanted it fleshed out. You did.
That's it. That's what happened. That's how we got to here, is it's just a variance. And normally you would see setback things, with churches and some report from the planning commission. But that's why there's not one here, because it really is just a straight variance, is where the grant for our LUPA in this instance was not and which is why I entered a clarifying letter. It is not like an SP. It's not a blank check. You still have to meet the zoning code, which is more stringent when you're putting non-residential stuff in an R6 zone district. And that's why they're back here.
Yeah, because I think I had that thought too with the SP thing, but I think it's because it's a religious, like they
And
they
they've
can.
already gone through the accommodation process.
Yeah, so
Yes,
that's,
that makes sense.
but I had that, like, I had to dust off some RLUPA,
Yeah, that was it, but that makes sense, and I did see Joey's letter. I just didn't, our packet said one thing and then that said that, and I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
yeah, so, frankly, I saw, this image that's up on here right now, to me, demonstrates the hardship that I saw here, which is, the shape of their property here is odd, given this, it's hilly in this thing, but also, to me, part of it is, you have the ingress and egress points that I think are going to be required by the fire department. If you put those as Mr. Ransom suggested, was the sort of putting them on the other side, I actually think that that may be less safe than putting them in the back from a, because you have sort of the ability to have it jam up with traffic at Trinity Lane. And so I'm by no means a traffic engineer, but in terms of just looking at it, I think that it has to be there. And I don't think they can go any further back because of that residential property in the bottom left corner.
Right.
So that's, to me, this is like, you know, I believe based upon the property and, you know, the statements about, I know they had some friends that lived a little further west down Trinity here, and so I know the hilliness of the area pretty well, and so
And
I
it's
feel.
a thoroughfare, it connects Clarksville Highway down to
Yeah.
Dickerson, where you can get on the interstate and Brick Church Pike. So a lot of people who live in North Nashville use that thoroughfare to get to the interstate or Trinity.
Right, and
Or get further down Trinity.
And I feel like by doing these here, they actually are visually creating something that is probably more appealing for the surrounding property by having the sort of residential structure closer to the street instead of this access road, but.
I agree with you there, yeah.
From sort of to comply with what the fire marshal is going to require for an ingress and egress, I think that this is the best way to set this up on this particular piece of land. So I believe that they have demonstrated a hardship, and I think that you know, I would support the request. Well, I didn't want to cut off anybody's opinions.
Yeah, well, can we open it back up? I have just two questions for them. First off, I think this is great. I think senior multifamily is fantastic, right? They need to move into homes, be social. I think that's a positive thing. So just want to commend you for that from that development side. I guess two quick questions I have, and you may not know this, but what are the unit count of the current development? And then if you did stick within the current setbacks, what would the unit count be if you had to essentially go cut back to 40 feet, 20 feet, et cetera?
The current unit count is 254 units, and I think within the current zoning, I'll let Chad speak to the number we had.
Yeah, if we were to
I know
set
maybe.
it,
I said I know you may not.
oh yeah,
Exactly.
if we were to set it back, it would be difficult to tell because we didn't necessarily do that study on this specific layout. So
Okay.
I don't have that answer, sorry.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing again unless you had another question.
No, not for them. Thank you. Appreciate it. I mean, listen, I want to support this. I think it's great for the community. It just is a big variance ask, and I just don't know the implications of that kind of holistically for the area. I'm generally familiar with Trinity Lane in that area. I know how hilly it is over there.
Yeah, I mean, there
but-
was a 5-story unit that was approved across the street. So, I mean, what we'd be approving is not inconsistent with what's gonna be in the surrounding
Right.
area.
And I think what's helpful on the special exceptions, at least, is they kind of provide all the input, right? Like you see light and all the other stuff. But I don't know, is the one across the street also set back 20 feet? I mean, I may or may not, I don't think I was.
Well, it would have been a rezoning, so an SP, so it would have been whatever they.
Whatever it was, right?
But I think the other component of it, I mean, to me, you know, if part of the church's mission, right, is to develop affordable senior workforce housing, I don't know that it's in keeping in consistency with that mission to cut out the number of units they could possibly build. And so I don't think that they could push this further back and keep the same number of units. And so, you know, part of it to me is that, you know, this is sort of what they've come up with in terms of the number of units that they want to put here to satisfy that mission under our LUPA. And from in terms of the variance ask, I mean, I think if we look at just the land and we look at just how the property's set up, like I think it would probably be something that in a vacuum just looking at the way that this lot line is in the back and the way that the residential structures are, that we probably would, I think they would have a good argument even without this sort of Arlupa component to it. If that basically just because of how this access road needs to be put in there, and that it sort of creates a little bit of separation from the residential properties and the housing units.
Yeah.
Did you have any other comments? I see you're thinking there.
Yeah, I'm,
That's it.
I want to make it work. I'm just wondering, the future development, lack of green space, lack of landscape buffer and other stuff. I'm trying to figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, I'll say I'm struggling a bit with the, maybe it's the lack of information, not having it graphically, not having a plan
Yeah.
that's really understandable for the record. If it was rezoned, it would have that plan and it would have specific requirements, and I just feel like we don't, in my opinion, we don't have enough today to approve it and it be followed, I guess, in the future. And so I'm just struggling with it from that perspective. I don't fully understand the height request. My colleague's doing a great job trying to interpret it here, but I'm on the fence right now.
I mean, we've got, I guess we could either, someone could make a motion to approve and we'll see how it shakes out and if we get another member or two to vote, but also mindful that, the applicant may want to defer. I'd sort of leave it to their discretion if they want to move forward or if they want to defer it. If it doesn't feel like they're going to have 4 votes today.
Yeah, it's hard to tell right now. I could open the public hearing if the applicant would like to respond to that.
I'll go ahead. We certainly could provide some more clear exhibits. I don't think anything about the plan would change. If it does, again, we're challenged to be able to move forward. But we could more clearly explain what the request is. The reality is that with a 40-foot setback and the height restriction, we exceed it everywhere. All across the frontage. That sky plan, we're going to exceed it in some form or fashion to achieve the development. We can still show what that exceedance looks like, but it will be, at varying heights along the frontage, we will exceed that sky plane.
And that would be something good for us to
Sure.
really understand. I mean, this is a variance case. It's
Right,
not a
right.
special exception. If you're in the UZO, it
Right.
would be a special exception, and we do approve those if the conditions exist to approve those, but it's a variance. It's a different type
Sure.
of case. So I would feel better having more clear exhibits.
Right, yeah, we can do that. Again, the details of the request will remain. What we're asking, we can just show kind of what that looks like up against the R8, kind of base standards.
And you heard before there's a few other meetings. There's a May 16th, a June 6th. Would you have a preference if we deferred it
As early as possible,
to May 16th?
yes.
Okay, so I will.
Because we can turn these exhibits around tomorrow.
I'll close the public hearing and then we'll keep talking and we'll vote. So any further comments or a vote? motion?
I think getting more information will be helpful. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'd like to try to, even though it may not sound like it, I'd like to try and make it work.
Well,
So having some information.
the other piece of this too is just from a logistics standpoint. I know I'm not going to be at the May 16th meeting, which leaves, the 3 people plus maybe our chairman will be back and we might have a new member by then. So I might suggest the 6th just to be sure that there's enough bodies here in the room to actually make a decision.
We could probably try the 16th. There's not enough bodies. It would be
It'll get deferred
deferred.
anyway.
It would,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have
Yeah, that's true.
a meeting if we didn't have enough people, so.
But I do think, it's up to the applicant. I do think it's up to the applicant. But I think to Mr. Bradford's point is if there's only 4 at the May 16th meeting, that's a harder, if just one person has a question, then that's a harder approval. They're more likely, if they're trying to get an approval, their best bet is to come at the 6th where you at least will have 5 or 6 members. That's just a thought. It's up to them, but I just wanted to say that.
Let us know here. We can open the public hearing. You can let us know if you have a different idea.
No, we're just trying to manage the funding that comes with the low-income housing
Sure.
tax credit application. And so trying to clear those hurdles in a timely manner to preserve the funds to afford the affordableness of the property. Could you give us 1 second just to understand
Yes,
the
go ahead.
financial impacts of that timeline change?
Can I ask one more question? Even though it's obvious on the plan, I just want to make sure I didn't misread it. Is it also you can access this from Young's Lane? It looks like you can from the back, but I just wanted to be sure I read it right.
Yeah, so the parcels, the project touches 6 parcels that the church owns, and then the church exists on a parcel. We will be combining all the parcels into one overall 30 acre.
So there's 2 access points. That's what I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
This is a question for, I don't know, you, Ann, or Joey. This is a 55 plus a multifamily apartment complex that in theory could be approved for variances. Is there anything that requires them to continue to operate that as a senior living complex?
Yes.
Because plans I see right now, there are not a lot of amenities that reflect a 55 and older community.
Yeah, the grant of the regional accommodation is contingent upon that. If they were to choose to do otherwise, they'll get stop work orders and rezonings would have to occur. This
So they
is
have to
just,
come back to ask for rezoning
Yes.
or whatever.
they have to go to planning, go to council.
Okay.
The grant was contingent upon that being,
And I just wanted to say this for the record for my colleagues, not that this will help or anything. Initially, after reviewing this, I did feel the same concerns that our chair and Mr. Ransom felt, but after looking at this, and then when I think about West Trinity Lane and how it curves and it hills, and I know where this is and how their church is kind of even on a hill almost, I normally, typically, if we was anybody else, I don't like these types of variance asks, I don't. But as I drive down West Trinity Lane and I see all of these developments that look like this, I don't think what they're asking is out of character from what's going on the area. And I do think because it is a church and they're combining all the land, that's probably the unusual way that it got to us. But I still understand y'all's concerns. I was just saying for the record, because we're probably gonna have to vote on this, that I was generally supportive. But at first I was more in your camp. I think what took me over was understanding the context and understanding how they were doing this and why it came to us this way. Because it is different than how we typically see it. So I understand why you guys feel that way, because we don't typically see them this way, but I got over the hump. That's the only thing I wanted to say.
I appreciate you saying that, and maybe I'm generally, just to kind of piggyback on that thought, and hopefully the applicant is listening, when we see special exceptions, it comes with a variety of things. Not only does it come with more information, but it comes with, hey, we're gonna do this for landscape buffer, open green space, and there's kind of a sum of all things, right, that makes the ask. To me, I see, only a part of that, and it's strictly just a variance, but I think making an ask like this and having some additional other things that you normally would see presented to us in a special exception, even though it's not, probably would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it is a sort of an odd case, because part of the number of units is in a sense what makes it the affordable senior housing. The affordability is the sort of component mission of the institution. And so
You need the unit count.
for me, it's I'm there because I'm sort of jumping from this to this to this to this.
I agree with you. That's how I
It's that, okay, so that number is what's there based upon this. And so because of that, reducing the footprint would impinge upon that mission. And so,
in defense of the applicant too,
Yeah.
because Mr. Ransom had the same thoughts you had, but then Joey cleared it up for me, and I remembered reading his letter. They didn't start the process the way that most people start a process like this. They started it a different way, and then they were kind of directed to go this route. So it's not I think if this was any other developer, they would have came with a special exception or gone to planning to rezone for an SP. But here, because they went through their reasonable accommodation process because of RLUIPA, they were sort of routed a different way, and maybe that's why they didn't give us the information. I understand why you want the information, so I'm not saying that to change your mind. I'm just saying in defense of the applicant,
Yeah.
I think they came to us this way because of how they
Yep.
were routed through a process, and so it's not, I don't think they were prepared to give that, and I'm just saying that, so.
And I don't want to interrupt all the thoughts here, but the public hearing was still open, so
Yeah.
we need to get back to that.
And I guess my main question would June 6th impede on your funding? Okay, all right.
You saying it would?
It would.
Okay, so you would prefer, if we defer it, we may not.
Yeah.
You would prefer May 16th.
We would. Can I ask for clarity on if there were a 3-2 in favor of vote today, what the kind of clarification is around that?
It'll stay on our agenda for 516, and the folks that voted are allowed at 516 to change their vote. The member who is not present can watch the proceedings, become eligible and vote. If it still remains 3-2 or 3-3, let's say, then the case is denied by operational law.
So it would come back on the agenda at 516 with a chance to modify votes then, but not
Not June
modify
6th.
between now and then. It's
Correct.
at that meeting.
Correct, it'll be at that meeting.
And just point of clarity, I mean, Joey can attest, I mean, we've been working on this for the past, I think, 3 months or so with Joey to get to this point. I mean, I think we could have brought additional information, and maybe some of these other kind of qualitative type things you're mentioning can be pointed out, like the green space we are providing. But, this is kind of where we all, arrived on to get here today.
Yeah, and I know we can close the public hearing and discuss some more, but I don't know that we would, even if this were just a straight up variance request, I don't know that we would necessarily even be asking for more information.
I would.
Because, well, okay.
Yeah, I would.
But yeah.
So if there's no more questions for them, or do you have any additional, you look like you're thinking a bit. I don't want to cut you off, but we want to keep the meeting. Okay. Y'all good?
I just know we need to move forward on the project as quickly as possible for it to be a viable deal the way it's being financed. So that's what we're deliberating.
The extra information that you're asking for is going to show what was discussed, and that is us being in violation of those setbacks.
Yeah, we need to understand the extent of the ask. I mean, it's been said, but it's not really understandable on the drawings, and we need to, at least some of us need to understand that, or asking for
Members,
that.
I can give you some idea. We've seen exhibits in the past the three-dimensional exhibit that shows the sky plane and how much of the building is penetrating into it. More like a volumetric kind of drawing that y'all have seen that shows how much of the building is out of compliance.
And the setbacks, we've seen setbacks on the drawings and how much the building exceeds the setback, and
Do we ever, for variances or something unique like this, do we ever put, certain requirements for landscape buffers or trees along certain areas or anything like that? Can we make that a condition for approval? Is that?
I guess when we get to that point, if we get to that
Is that
point.
point, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
wondering.
you can suggest it, they're hearing you say it, maybe they would take
Yeah,
that
that's kind of
suggestion, but I think as long as you don't have any other questions, I think we're gonna close the public hearing. Is there any more discussion? Does someone wanna make a motion?
Yeah, I am concerned about setting this up in a manner that kills this project for a few more details, especially given the RLUPA reasonable accommodation component of this, that we are, I don't know if the risk or concern of deferral for a project of this value to the community warrants pushing this, but I may be in the minority there, so.
can I ask you a clarifying, are you saying that you think it might be unduly burdensome? Is that what you're saying?
I think that based upon, I think that the demonstration of where, what we have in front of us, this illustration that's put in front of us that shows how this property's drawn out, what the elevation is. I don't need any more to know that there has to be a service drive access from an ingress and egress point based on the number of units. That the number of units needs to be what it is to further the mission of the church. And so in terms of shoving it backwards, this service drive and knowing that that residential property is immediately south of it, frankly, I don't know that any new information would do anything more than delay this case. So, and my concern is it would threaten tax credit financing for affordable housing in a manner that could severely hamper the project. So I think considering the implications of a deferral, which in many, many circumstances wouldn't be a thing that would matter, I think given the representation of the applicant that it would have an impact on the financing of the project, which again, is tied to the mission of the, ordinarily financing is not something we care about, but here it is tied to the use, which is tied to the religious purpose. So that's sort of my urge that we consider approving this today.
Is that a motion?
Give me some trees.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt, to answer your question before, you had asked if you could impose conditions for a variance, just to clarify that you can.
Okay.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the variances as requested based upon the demonstration of a hardship due to the shape and topography of the property, and would entertain any amendments related to landscaping that might facilitate the approval.
I second that.
Okay, there's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Can I add an amendment? Just that there be a landscape buffer along the back corner between that and the residential property?
I will agree to that condition.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye, raise your hand. We've got 4 in favor and 1 opposed, so that's approved.
Okay.
We'll take a break.
Thank you for your
Short
time.
break.
Okay.
Appreciate
Case is
it.
approved by
Thank
vote
you.
4-1
Thank you very
with
much.
conditions. With that, the board will take a adjourn for just briefly for a break. Thank you.
Right.
I hit the lights earlier.
It feels like Walmart at 2 a.m. in here.
Oh, it's Joey.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get back in session. Again, the Board of Zoning Appeals is now back in session. The next case the board will hear will be case 2024-63, Four Stone Capital LLC is the appellant, 1218 Dickerson LLC owners of the property at 1218, 1224, 1226 Dickerson Pike, 5 Ligon Avenue, and 1055 Whites Creek Pike, requesting a special exception for setback and height requirements in the CS, NS, the UDO, the Skyline UDO, and UZO districts. The applicant is seeking to construct mixed-use buildings with multifamily retail and commercial uses referred to the board under section 17-12035D, 17-12060F. The appellant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740, 180 item C. This case was previously approved by the board under case 2022-82, and the 2-year time limit expired, or will be expiring. Let me double check. Yeah, expiring here in July. And I think the members, the applicants are back before you. I don't believe they'll commence and obtain a permit before that time limit expires, so that's why they've refiled to get in here. And we do have a letter from the planning department, because this is a special exception like the last case. Let me see here. I'll get that for you guys while I'm sorry. For some reason during our break, my computer didn't want to open this permit. So I'll work on that. If you guys will, let me go through the PowerPoint here. Okay. The subject properties involved are the parcels that I read out previously that front on Ligon, Dickerson, Auction Way, and Whites Creek Pike. These are the parcels in the aerial photograph. These were submitted at the prior hearing and superimposed. Next slide shows the submittal with this hearing. So that was, I believe this one was submittal this time, and this was a submittal from previous case. Again, looking and comparing the application submitted by the appellant between this time and the previous case. And you see I left the case numbers. I just did a direct copy from the PowerPoint in 22. So you can compare and contrast if we need to go back through it. There are elevation drawings submitted too. I did not include those in here. If the applicants or opposition wish me to display them, I'll be happy to get those in this PowerPoint. And broadcast those as well. But there's opposition present to this case. Each side will have 10 minutes to present their testimony to the board. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Cooper. And Miss, if you'll identify yourselves and make your presentation to the board.
Thank you. I'd like to reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal, please. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm John Cooper with the law firm Holland & Knight, 511 Union Street. I'm here representing Four Stone Capital, who is the owner and developer of the subject properties you see. As mentioned, we were here 2 years ago to obtain a special exception. We are seeking an extension of that for another 2-year period. As you know, they're only good for 2 years. The reasons for the extension: 1, 2 years is not a whole lot of time for a project of this size, given the size of the property. More importantly, the combination of the interest rates and building materials just kind of put a delay for a period on progressing, but they are now, again, actively pursuing, moving towards a building permit. Just to be safe, wanted to go ahead and extend it in case they got up to July and still weren't ready for a building permit. In addition to what was approved last time, there's one very minor change, which is to request an extension of the street setback special exception to include the property along Ligon. That's the property that's right next to the tall cliff, and it has been determined that in order to build the 6-story building that the Dickerson South Corridor study would allow, because it's next to that tall cliff, the special exception is needed from a constructability standpoint. It's important to note that the property is zoned CS-NS. We actually, at the Councilman Parker's request, we rezoned it to the NS, no short-term rental designation. The properties that are along Ligon are primarily short-term rentals, and the councilman did not want any short-term rentals in this development, so we rezoned it at the time we went through the last BZA approval to add the NS designation. As you can see, if you look at other properties in the area, this request is consistent with other development in the area. We're seeking a maximum of 12 floors at the build-to line, which is consistent with the Dickerson South Corridor study that the Planning Commission approved. It's important to note that under the existing CS, if they used the height control plane, they could, given the depth and size of this lot, they could go up to 30 stories by right without seeking any BZA approval. That would just be following the height control plane. But the developer felt like this was a better fit for the neighborhood and more harmonious with what's in the area. We held a community meeting on April 18th, which was public. We sent the notices out. It was held at Goodwood, and no opposition came to that meeting. We do have Michelle Beauvais with EOA Architects here if you have specific questions about the project, but we would ask that you approve this extension for another 2-year period. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions for the applicant? I'll have to say I might need you to explain what you're requesting on Ligon for us a little bit, or point us to the right exhibits.
Yes, if you have, I'm not sure which pages.
And can you identify your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Michelle Beauvais with EOA Architects.
And the address.
511 Main Street, Nashville. I don't know if I think you were sent the whole package, even though it's not in the PowerPoint, but along Ligon, that piece of property, the ask is for the setback, to be the same setback that it is on Dickerson, where we could build up to the property line, and then also to build the full height at that build-to line, as opposed to so if you look at page 8, if you have the full document.
We'll look through and see if we have that page.
Is that page 8 in the lower right?
Yes, page 8 in the lower right. You can see the slightly darker orange shape at the property line of Ligon. So that's the setback and the sky plane representation along Ligon. So 6 floors at the property line, which is the same as what was requested along Dickerson. That whole piece of property is within the Dickerson corridor study for 6 floors. And so it's just, it's mainly an extension of that.
And so when the image comes up, it's the orange area. It says area being requested for special exception.
Correct.
That's what I was missing the last case. So thank you for having this exhibit, because it's helpful to understand what the ask is. And that's the thing that is different from the last approval, is you're asking.
Yes, that's the only change.
Okay.
And you stated that this had to do with the cliff that was on the other side. Basically, it's
To
a,
be able to wrap that corner, that
Constructability.
Yeah,
street
it
corner.
obstructs it to where you couldn't.
okay.
Okay, any other questions?
I wasn't here 2 years ago, so I'm just digesting all this.
I see. Okay, do you need more information then from them on the original ask?
And maybe you said it earlier, what was the purpose for the small change, asking for that? You were just essentially to make it match the other side that's on?
Correct. Previous had been looking at potential townhomes, but to provide a nicer corner for the street, what we're looking at is being able to wrap the building around that piece of Ligon to build out that corridor, that street corner, and make it consistent with the rest of the development. So just extending that previous ask a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
And this is a special exception case, so you're not required to show a hardship. You're just required to, if you can tell us about the pedestrian experience and light and all, and how that's not impacting other properties, that might be helpful.
Yeah, so, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to point them to the light and shadow study.
Yeah, their very last page has some light and shadow studies, but we do have, of course, sidewalks and planting strips all along Dickerson that fall in line with the zoning. Same would be on Ligon. There would be sidewalk, planting strip for walkability along that face of the property. Again, complying with the 6 stories. These are morning and afternoon shadows, so these are some of the slightly longer shadows, not midday.
And if you look at the aerial photo, you can see that the pedestrian environment right now is virtually non-existent. So this would actually build usable sidewalks with a 4-foot planting strip and, make it a pedestrian activated street.
Right. And that would be all the way around the property, including Auction Way and Whites Creek Pike when that phase came online.
Do you need a couple more minutes to look at it?
No, thanks for asking.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
No, thank you for this zone study.
Yeah. Any comments you all have?
We'll just address during rebuttal if needed.
It looks like you have 7 minutes and 20 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll now hear from those parties opposed to the case. If you'll come forward, I've got 4 seats there. Feel free to have a seat. And you guys have seen how the other cases work. Just to your right, where you all are sitting in front of Ms. Davis, there will be a clock. And again, I'll start after you introduce yourself, whoever the first speaker is.
Hello, okay. Jeff Kindig, 1111 McGavick Pike, Nashville, Tennessee. I own a property on Ligon Avenue. I'm going to be reading from something, so forgive me for that, but it's how I do. The Skyline Redevelopment District Plan specifies buffering requirements in Section C2BC of the plan. The Skyline Redevelopment Plan specifically recognizes and calls for appropriate buffering between less dense existing development, does not mention the zoning, and more highly intense development introduced as part of the Skyline Redevelopment District Plan. The plan calls for protecting adjacent neighbors when considering new development, and the proposed use is significantly denser than the adjacent properties, and this is a very intense development. Most of the properties next to this are 1- and 2-family dwellings, even though they're zoned commercial. If the, section 17035C1 of the code states, if the site is within a zoning overlay district, redevelopment district, or an area having a design plan adopted by Metropolitan Council that includes a master plan or design guidelines for the placement of buildings at the location, such guidelines shall apply. Specifically from the Skyline Redevelopment District Plan. The zoning code of the Metropolitan Government will generally determine buffering requirements for new development. However, MDHA may require additional buffering to afford commercial, residential, and pedestrian interests from protection from traffic, noise, glare, trash, odors, negative visual impacts, and other harmful effects likely to be caused by the introduction of more intensive use. The material required and the use of the buffers will be determined based upon the relative intensities of adjacent uses. We would ask that in the request before us, the code provides protections for neighbors in both the code and the Skyline Redevelopment District Plan buffering requirements. The code provides that the applicant shall provide evidence to the board that the proposed building height shall not create an adverse impact on air, light, shadow, or wind velocity patterns due to the configuration of the building relative to the maximum permitted height standards, including the height control plane. As compared with existing structures in the vicinity or approved but not yet built structures. This should be enough, but assuming it is not enough, this is about preventing negative impacts on adjoining and other properties. The developer will still make money if he stays within the existing code. However, the economic interests and negative consequences on neighboring properties will be significant. By requiring developers to obtain a special exception rather than a variance to exceed the height and setback restrictions in the zoning code, the burden on the applicant would only be to provide evidence to the BZA that the proposed building will not adversely impact surrounding properties. To the contrary, the developer's own sun shade study indicates that shade will be thrown on adjacent properties year-round from morning until late afternoon. Not to mention privacy concerns having a development this intense built 50 feet from the back of what are essentially single-dwelling occupied homes that are not used for short-term rental at all. Last meeting, the developer indicated to that the neighbors knew the zoning in our area when we acquired the property. The developer also understood the zoning restrictions that were in place when they acquired their property, and those restrictions, to my understanding at the time, limited the height to approximately 6-story. Everyone in here understands the development will negatively impact longtime owners who have lived in the area for decades. Many of these owners have significant investment in their properties. Please do not let the economic interest of the developer trump the interest of longtime residents of Nashville and Fern Hill. The zoning application, if this situation does not call for strict application of the zoning code, then what does? I'm not anti-development, but every development should be scrutinized within the current code, especially if the developer is asking for exceptions that are specifically prohibited. In this situation, we believe the exceptions or variances being asked for should be denied as the negative impacts on longtime Nashville residents far outweigh any benefits presented. Just a few of the issues that we see right offhand that were outlined in what I just stated. There are traffic concerns. Their own study shows that shade and the cast of shadows will impact the adjacent properties, which are owner occupied. Negative visual impact. If you weren't here for the last meeting on this, I brought in a couple of exhibits to show it's immense compared to the property next to it. It's 60 feet above the cliff. Potential glare, potential noise, and it provides for others that we don't even think of. Thank you for your time.
Where is your property in relation to this proposed development on Ligon?
It's, I'm right at Ligon and Whites Creek, so it's right behind it.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I appreciate the opportunity to address this as I was unable to make the other meeting. My name is Fred Stevens.
And your address, please.
My address is 15 Ligon Avenue. I also have 6 other parcels on the street. I've been there since '08. Built my building. It's my office, and I have a security department above. I was made unaware of this until we did get notice from the architect, and we had a meeting with them, and they showed us this, and by that time, it had pretty much been approved. So we were not notified of any council meeting or any community meetings or anything that addressed this. Anybody on the street was not notified. They had meetings at McFerrin, I think, and meetings at another community center, but nobody that was affected was aware of it until it had already pretty much gotten down the line. And our councilman, I had asked him when the property was first sold to let me know, but he never did call me, and once I found out, he didn't call me back. But I would be looking at a wall 60 feet high, between 50 and 60 feet high, 40 feet from my back porch. It would put me in the shade from 10 o'clock in the morning, by their own studies, from 10 o'clock in the morning till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I would have no access to sunlight, which in the wintertime, especially since the back of my house or office is glass, would certainly affect me in terms of my heating. But just the ability to enjoy what I have now would be taken away completely because it's only 50 feet away. I would be looking at, or somebody would be looking at me right in my back door. And to me, this is just, I mean, I have no problem with phase one. If you put that back up, phase one is 6 stories high, which is with what's being done on Dickerson Road now, that's in context with what's being done on the rest of Dickerson Road, if you're familiar with the apartments that are going up now, that thing. But to be 12 stories high is not in the same context. There's nothing that approaches this. And isn't it interesting that phase one is 6 stories high, which they were going to build townhomes on Liggett Avenue that won't be affected by sunlight. But phase two is 12 stories high, and it's going to not only affect me, it's going to affect the houses that are built on Fern, where people have built $1 million houses, their view and their access, it's going to be above them. So I just, I can't understand why this got so far.
Sir, just to clarify, the photo we're looking at right now, is your property the building that's just outside of the orange line?
Yes.
Okay.
And one in the middle up on the peak of the,
yeah.
I'm at the highest point of the building.
And you're, which resident, because I don't see a resident, are you a resident of the area, or is this
Am I?
Or neither of you are residents, is that correct?
Well,
Okay.
I have a security apartment above my office building there.
Okay.
We spend a lot of time there, as well as I have a primary home in Green Hills, but a lot of my time is spent here, and the house next door to me is, I have a tenant in there, and the houses across the street from that, I also have tenants there.
Okay.
So.
And then is your property, the billboard that's there at Whites Creek and Ligon, is that?
That's I don't own the billboard. Lamar actually owns it, but my property's right next to that.
Right next to it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to kind of get an understanding of where y'all's.
So just a point of clarification. Should the clock stop once we start answering questions? Because we were wanting to reserve 2 minutes for rebuttal.
You all don't have any rebuttal?
Oh, we don't?
As the respondents, but yes, the clock should.
Okay, but another question is the traffic. I mean, 2 lanes on Whites Creek Pike hardly handles the traffic there is now. If you come in the morning and in the afternoons, so how are you going to, as many units as you're proposing to develop in phase 2, there's no way you've got the egress and the entrance that would handle that. And if you move the setback closer to Whites Creek, there would be no room for expansion to increase the egress and interest. I mean, the traffic situation, I don't know whether a traffic study's been made or not, but certainly, the size building they're talking about doing 12 stories high is just, to me, just way out of context of the whole neighborhood. Why would they do 6 stories where Dickerson Road is and do 12 stories right next to the interstate? It just certainly doesn't follow. I mean, if they keep it to 6 stories, I have no argument, gentlemen. with what they want to do.
And I would agree with that. I'd like to point out that the photo there, there's a house, if you look to the left of that photo, right where the pointer is, right around in there, there's a house that's currently valued at like $2 million that sits between Fred's house and the billboard that is not shown on this photo. So if it was an updated photo, and that is her office / primary residence.
Yes, she has it.
She was going to be here today. She couldn't make it. She called me to make sure that I mentioned that the photos that
So
her house was there.
these buildings that we're seeing on Ligon, those are on top of the cliff,
Yes.
the top?
Yes, and I have we weren't able to show it last time I got on my computer. I don't know if you could see it. I have a video that shows with a drone going up to the top of the building, and you actually you are level with the cell tower when you get to the top of their building. So this isn't just going to impact our houses, it's going to impact everything all the way up to Lucille. It's actually above the top of the hill.
Yes.
And I'm happy to submit the video if you guys want. It's like 2 minutes. I don't know if Joey can show it or not.
But to deny me sunlight for the most of the day, I think is certainly an impact on my property and everything and all that property that's going to be behind phase 2. I mean, everybody is going to be in the shade. You're not going to be able to see the sunlight, especially in the wintertime.
When was your building built?
In '08, it was
Okay.
completed.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So I've been there 16 years.
Members, I just wanted to double check since the gentleman brought up notice. He was on the mail list. It's listed. Mailing goes to Frederick R. Stevens Revocable Trust at 15 Ligon is the mail address provided. We use the assessor's office, whatever, for your parcels, but.
I was noticed on public hearings, but I literally don't remember any meetings that I've been noticed on. However, the developer and his architect and landscape architect and attorney met with us privately after we had been through the BZA meeting the first time, but there were little to no changes. Considering, and I'd just like to point out the Skyline Redevelopment District Plan specifically says negative visual impact. I don't see how anybody could argue that having something built bigger than the mountain as you go under Fern Avenue, the mountain on top, the building's going to be as big as that. And if nothing else, it's a negative visual impact. But there's also privacy concerns having that 50 feet off the back of residence. I plan on building my residence here. So, and I know that's not the zoning, it's probably considered non-conforming, but it doesn't talk about what could be built there, it talks about what is there. And the developer should have known through due diligence before buying a parcel of this size that there was a Skyline Development District plan and what the restrictions were, and that he shouldn't be impacting this negatively properties next to him. We're all good with 6 stories, which will be impactful, but we understand developers have to make money. We understand there has to be an incentive for them to develop a site like this. However, 12 stories seems onerous at best. Thank you very much.
Okay, any additional comments? No, any questions then?
I did want to say, I'm not against progress. And, I've been there 16 years, and I've waited for Dickerson Road to develop, to see improvements that are coming. So, I'm for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, never mind, we have.
Thank you. I'll quickly try and address some of the points that were raised here. First, yes, it is in the MDHA redevelopment district, and the project will be submitted to the MDHA Design Review Committee to review all these things. That's a separate process from this. So yes, they knew they were within the redevelopment district, and that was obviously taken into consideration. When you look at the adverse impact of shadows, you have to compare it against what is by right, what they could do under the existing CS zoning. Because of the size of this lot, they can build 30 stories. That would greatly cast more shadows than what is proposed as part of this special exception. I would note that the occupied homes that are referenced, those are actually zoned MUGA, so those are non-conforming homes now. Those could be redeveloped and built taller. There was a reference to us not complying with the code. This special exception process was specifically added to the code for this reason, to encourage this type of additional height and greater pedestrian activation within the urban zoning overlay. So we are utilizing the code provisions that the council has put in place for this very purpose. We did have a community meeting. It was noticed. It was held at Goodwood. The notices were mailed out. The residence that was referenced as being an occupied residence, it's actually zoned commercial. It was built as a commercial building, as an office building, but I believe she lives in this office building or above the office building, but it's not a residentially zoned property. There's also references to negative visual impacts, which it is not a standard. I mean, the law is pretty clear that you don't have a right to a view. So as long as you're complying with the zoning tools that are available, then that isn't a standard to be considered. Do you have anything else to add?
I think the only other thing right now that we did want to mention is that along the property along the cliff, we are pulling back about 50 feet from there with a drive, which by right, we could build up to that cliff, and we are not. We are pulling the building 50 feet off of that to allow for an access drive, but also to provide relief from those adjacent properties.
Have you guys considered any other buffering to provide relief to the adjacent properties?
Additional, like landscape and that kind of, I mean, there is landscape included with that drive, but of course it's down at the cliff. I mean, there's 30-foot drop.
Yeah, I'm
just
familiar.
additional depth in addition to the 50 feet.
Yes.
We haven't, I mean, it's not part of the current plan, obviously.
Okay.
And again, that's something that MDHA could consider as part of their review.
I know, but we have to also consider it when we have opposition and people saying that it'll injure their property. I understand, but that's all I asked.
I have some questions, but I don't know, could we go to the exhibit that has the shadow study?
Well, anyway, go ahead, sorry.
So, hopefully all the exhibits are in here, but, so there's a building with the access drive, and it abuts the property along Ligon. And I see shadows on that property, but I was looking at another exhibit, and it didn't seem like you were asking for any relief on that you weren't asking for a setback.
That's only the piece, so the properties that are in opposition, that's the ones at the cliff, so that's the phase 2, the left part of the property, correct. The one where we're asking for the additional
It's not along
setback
the
is the Ligon property along the street, not along an adjacent property.
And it's hard to, without all the exhibits, I'm looking at one now that's your page 4B.
Yes.
And it shows the setbacks that are requested. Yeah, and I don't see a setback request along that new private access road because that's the private access road, not a building. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just
Correct.
trying to.
We're not asking for
So you're not asking for any relief against their properties?
That's correct. We are not asking to encroach any, correct. We're already, there's no, that's not a street that has a skyplane requirement on it.
Yeah.
And we are pulling our property back 40 to 50 feet from the cliff and property line there already.
And the shadow that's being cast on their properties is allowed to be cast by right, I guess, if you're not asking for any relief there?
That, yeah,
Am I
that
understanding
would
that
be, because that side of the property is the only side that we're currently looking at potential 12 stories, because it faces Whites Creek Pike and the interstate. And so, yes, that shadow would be if it was a 12-story.
And the 12-story is allowed by right, from what I understand.
For this zoning,
You said
it could be up to 30, I mean, but we're only proposing 12.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that exhibit.
So
Sorry.
page 6, if you look at the white area that's hatched, that's following the height control plane. So that's what could be built by right without the special exception.
Okay. So I think I understand it. Any other questions?
I had one for Joey, but not the applicants.
Okay, well, we'll probably have to ask that question before, oh, you
Was
want to
it-
wait till the public hearing's closed?
Yeah, this is more just, they won't be able to answer, nothing directed to them.
Okay, so do you have any additional comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing, and I already know the question.
Joey, I had a quick question. This is in regards to the shadow studies.
Yes.
Is there something in particular where they have to pick a specific date and month to show?
No, sir. No, sir, there isn't.
So they could just pick any date and any time to show the shadow,
Yes, sir.
essentially?
Yeah, and our code actually doesn't speak to it other than by alluding that the applicant shall demonstrate to you guys that it doesn't have an adverse impact on light, wind, shadow, et cetera, in that sentence under.
Yeah,
But it does not specify, no, sir.
September and, I mean, this is just an aside, September and March aren't especially short or long days, and the times they picked are usually when the sun's at its most vertical. So it would be nice if Metro maybe had a specific month and times that they would pick so we could understand the shadows that were cast throughout the day.
I'll tell you, related to that, I'm happy, staff to discuss when we have these special exception height things to, give me summer and give us all 4 seasons.
Give us all 4 seasons, because,
Okay, yeah, no, I'm happy to pass that along to the applicants as far as what the board prefers to see.
June's 5:30 to 8 sunrise, and December's 7 to 4:30. And so not only is it the month, but the time, so it would be helpful, because the shadows most likely are much bigger than what's being reflected here throughout a majority of the day, both in the morning and night. But I understand that one, particularly in phase 2, like you said, I understand what you were kind of going through, so. Okay, yep. Joe, we can chat about it later. Thanks.
Okay, any other discussions or motion?
Never mind. We'll talk after. It has nothing to do with this case.
I was just first going to disclose that I grew up in this area and I'm very familiar with this area, and my mom and sister still live off the Dickerson Road corridor, and several years ago I was on the planning study for the Dickerson Road South corridor, so I just wanted all of that to be put on the record. So with all that being said, and we talk about this a lot, there's certain pockets of Nashville where these sort of like small neighborhood streets abut up directly into a major corridor. So, for instance, Dickerson is a major corridor, as the applicant said, and the opposition said. Drive down Dickerson Road now, it looks completely different. There's a lot of intense buildings being built on Dickerson Road. And so I think, so I agree with that. And so I think sort of some of the tension here is just that Ligon is a very sort of small, narrow road. And in the past, it was sort of like, I know the applicant talked about it, but I think it's kind of hard for whatever the current zoning is to give context to it, because a lot of this area that developed off of Dickerson was a hodgepodge of homes, small businesses, and so the zoning was kind of mixed. And so it's sort of hard to tell what the intent is of the area based off of just the zoning. And I think we do have to take into account that there are like existing homes there, but I did understand what you were saying, that the part on White's Creek, they can build by right. So I understand that. So there's nothing we can really do about that. But I do just wanted to encourage us as we vote on this to be thoughtful about Ligon, because Ligon, to what he said, I think the applicant was confused. He's right. If you go up to Fern has a bunch of houses that have been developed. A lot of those are short-term. Ligon hasn't necessarily been completely developed yet. So it's sort of still, you don't know what it's going to be until what it's going to be. And so we have to basically look at what's there today and think about that. And there are homeowners there, and they did show up. So I just wanted to say that. Because to Mr. Ransom's point, like something this intense, which I know they do have the right to build, but it will impact light, shadow. It just has to, based off of what it is and where you're putting it. So I just wanted us to think about that, if we want to put any conditions on it. So that was it.
Okay, additional comments?
Huh?
No, I'm just saying, it was a really good comment.
You have a comment? No, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I remembered the Ligon issue from the last, I think this property, though, most of the frontage of Ligon on the other side of it is vacant.
Yeah, because it used to be, there was an auction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, I mean, where I struggle is the, I get the concern about the light, but I mean, the 30 stories by right is the piece of this that to me, we could say no, and then they could build something much taller that could have a much more aggressive impact. Oh, no. No. I'm just saying, I think like it's one of those situations where the comparison, I think the point that Mr. Cooper made about the comparison to the by right is kind of one of the important things here of what this plan does versus what could be done there legally without having to seek approval from the board. So I just wanted the owners to know that that's part of the issue here, the opposition that showed up, and we always appreciate when people come and speak on these things, but that's there's a legal component to that we have to consider.
Okay, any other comments or motions?
And maybe the applicant can clarify this, the one spot on, it was townhomes, but it's no longer going to be townhomes, or this is that one corner that you were speaking to on Ligon?
Okay, we'll open the public hearing to answer just that question.
The area on Ligon that you're asking to wrap the corner?
Yes, the ownership we've gone through several versions, iterations, looking at townhomes, and so again, we're still in early stages. It could change back to townhomes, but in order to be consistent with the corner and build what we feel is a good street corner for Dickerson, it felt like the building really kind of needed to wrap. And it also allows them to get more units for their numbers. But it's also just to be consistent with the building, and sorry.
So the retail would
The retail would wrap that corner. Sorry, that's right. The retail would wrap that corner. Then there would be some individual dwelling units. They would be accessed directly through the building. And if I may bring that into traffic, I believe there may or may not be a secondary access point, but the majority of the traffic for all these residents would be on Auction Way. That's our main entrance drive. We're not directing additional traffic onto Ligon.
And I think, and I think, Mr. Cooper, I think you mentioned this, and I think this was raised earlier, that the zoning across the street would essentially allow the demolition of all those residential structures by right, correct?
Yes, they're mixed MUGA, I think is what they are.
And
So yes.
CS.
Yeah.
And CS, yes.
Okay.
So, what is basically being shown now is, one of the iterations previously. But what you're asking for is to wrap it essentially so the building, essentially what's represented in.
So
It's
building.
the dark gray
yeah.
building one would climb out a little bit.
Right, right.
And,
Just the red,
and the height on that would be,
it would still be within the 6 stories, which was part of the Dickerson traffic study,
okay. I guess it goes back to, yeah.
or the
Okay, thank
Dickerson corridor study, sorry.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing again.
I mean, that goes back to, there's a whole bunch of other houses on that street.
That's what I would.
And it kind of valleys it a little bit.
Yeah, and that, part of the reason why I was asking about the zoning though is that, I mean, like, there's nothing preventing the owners of the properties on the other side of the street from just wiping that clean and selling that, and it's no longer.
I know, but we
Yeah.
don't make decisions on what
Oh.
people do in the future.
Oh, totally.
It's prospective, and I will say, as somebody who lived in this district for a lot of time, a lot of upzoning occurred in this area without notice to residents. I was a resident, the neighborhood nearly got upzoned without any notice to me. And so that's why I'm saying.
Right,
that,
right.
Like,
Yeah,
sometimes
for sure.
properties get upzoned as a part of a large sweep that people may not be aware of. Now, I do understand, because it's in UGA, we envision it not being there. So I get that, so I do.
Right,
understand
right.
what
I
you're
think it's more, I'm thinking more of a, the sort of if, and what the sort of implications would be that, we're not sticking a 12-foot structure in the middle of what will always be, a single-family residential street, I think is the.
And I remember this, and I think the way that I felt more comfortable about this last time compared to this time is that I remember that there were gonna be townhomes, and I feel like townhomes are down step from the big buildings on Dickerson's, and so where there are current residential homes on Ligon, that it's like you're just coming down in intensity, whereas like, I get why they wanna wrap the building, cause they're trying to keep it like in context and like build out that corner, so I understand the applicant's point, but I think it's like, you're weighing both of those. I understand what they're saying, but I also understood, if you downstep, it's not seeming as egregious, but like, to their point too, White's Creek, they can build up as well, so.
Well, and then the other side is, I guess, like if somebody did come in and build something across the street, then all of a sudden you've got townhomes that are kind of sandwiched around a lot of bigger stuff. So, I mean, it's a tricky thing, because I think it definitely requires that thinking about the future, but thinking about the current and kind of what's allowed and what's not. So, I mean, I really appreciate the efforts to make it more pedestrian friendly and to build out a sidewalk and make it,
But they were gonna have to build a sidewalk anyway if you build anything there. If you build a house there, you gotta build a sidewalk.
true.
Not anymore.
Well, not anymore, but yeah, right. At the time that this was approved, yes, but
Yes, at the time it was approved, yes.
initially.
What would, can we open this back up? Sorry, I don't mean to belabor this. And you maybe hinted at this at the very beginning. Times changed, interest rates going up, things are more expensive. You need more units to probably make the development work. But initially, this had townhomes. I'm assuming that genesis of that came from matching the current streetscape of other residential homes along Ligon, right? If you can revert to your.
I don't recall the genesis of why the townhomes were proposed initially, but over the past 2 years, working with the EOA, they've done a lot of study and determined what's the architecturally and from a usage standpoint, the best for that building.
And I think that changed, I understand the economics of it, but I think that's where the tension is for me. I understand the economics, but it's like when we saw this, it was different, and now it's something else. And like I said, I don't have a problem with like a 2-year extension of what we already gave you guys, because that makes sense to me. I just have a problem with like an expansion of that, especially when we have testimony from people that live there that says it might injure, well, I don't think it might. I think it will likely injure their property, but to everybody else's point, they're kind of sandwiched between Whites Creek and Dickerson, so, but that's not before us, but that was my thought. Like I said, so I'm on the record. I don't have a problem with extending the 2 years because that's what we approved. I have a problem with the tweaks where we expanded. That's it.
Yeah, and to, Christina asked this earlier, the one specific building in phase 2 that's going to potentially cast a fairly long shadow on those residents, they're kind of within their right to build that and setting it back. So there's not much we can't do anything about that anyway.
I agree with that.
Right. Okay, any motions?
Yeah,
A little tired.
sorry, I'm just juicing on a million allergy pills right now. I will make a motion, that, we approve the special exception as requested, and, based upon the applicant's satisfaction of the factors in the code.
Okay, I'll second that motion. Any discussion on the motion?
Just to clarify, as requested, meaning,
As in this current application, as requested today, so with the modification of the building wraparound.
with the modification.
Well, that's today's
Yeah,
request
that's
is
just
that.
wanna clarify.
So, yeah, right, yes.
Right.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye, raise your hand. Aye. So we have, all opposed. Okay, so it's 3-2. That, sounds like that case will stay on the docket.
Yeah, this case will be on our agenda for May 16th. The members that participated, the 5, are allowed to change their votes, and Mr. Pepper, who's not present, can watch the testimony and become eligible. And I'm not sure about our new member. If that new member swears on before the 16th, she too can watch the testimony and become eligible in this case. But I don't know her timing just yet, so. With that, that case stands up and be listed as tied up on votes. And just the board, not reopen the public hearing. Yes, sir. Let me see, ransom. Okay, members, we're on to our last case of the day. That case is 2024-65 at 2820 Galton Pike. This is a request for 2 variances. One is a variance in the rear setback requirement to construct a leasing office. The variance request is required 20 foot from the rear property line. That'd be the property line opposite Galton Pike. Galton Pike on this drawing is to the immediate left here. So the request is to have a 20-foot rear setback. This variance request is 3 feet. That's at its closest approach. I think this piece here believes at 10, but at its closest approach at 3. And just for future reference, I know I hadn't covered this in a long time with new members, especially I'll have another one coming. Anytime I list the variances here, this will be at the worst case scenario. So it might be 3 feet at one point and 30 at another, but I always give you the worst case scenario. And then secondly, it'll be a variance in the landscape buffer yard along this eastern property boundary. It says along rear and side, but for us, we're just talking about this piece along which would be the rear. And the reason for that, I'll show you, this is the site plan submitted by the applicant. There is, in the future, going to be a development on this property, but this initial phase of the construction is to build a leasing office. You'll see why in a minute at the rear of the property. This is a view from Gallatin Pike, looking north in the upper left corner south. I spend way too much money at McDonald's to the south. And then a view of the subject property. The construction is going to happen here. And then a view to the immediate west of the property is, I believe, the applicant's development, which they're going to cover. Thank you, Joseph. Hey, can I say real quick before Joseph departs, it's his birthday, so happy birthday, sir. I want to embarrass you publicly.
Happy birthday.
So, hey, you're welcome. Happy birthday to you, sir. Thank you for coming. Joseph was real nice. I wasn't sure we were going to have 4 today, so. All right, this is the area photograph again. The proposed development would be here, and then these are apartments to the west. And I'll leave this photograph up to let the applicant, right? There's no one here in opposition. The gentleman in the back corner is your zoning inspector, so that's all I've got. I'll turn it over to you, sir. You have 5 minutes to present.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pierce Zabinden. I'm with Kimley Horn at 10 Leah Avenue, Suite 400 in Nashville. So I am here on behalf of the Canvas Apartment Developing Team. As you can see here, we are requesting our variance from the landscape buffer and setback requirement due to the fact that this leasing office being proposed, constructed, is going to serve the existing 8-building Canvas apartment complex that you see here outlined in blue. So the end goal is for this access drive and Canvas and leasing office will be to service this apartment complex and this apartment complex only. So the idea is to get it as close to the existing structures as possible to help, service that community. And as Mr. Hargis mentioned, the remainder of the property is going to be developed at a later date. Those plans are, not determined at this time, but for the portion of the property that's being developed now, this will only be to service the existing property that's currently owned by the same entity. So it should be noted that although the property ownership is listed differently, the overall ownership is the same group. So once this project is completed, the intent would be to bifurcate the property outlined in red and have that portion of the property that has the leasing office will be added into the existing Canvas apartment lot.
Yeah, so the variance at some point will go away.
Correct.
The need for it, okay. I thought, I'm sorry to interrupt, I meant to ask, there's a reason financially or loans or something why they can't be joined currently, the entity, or if there's some reason they have to stay separated at
I
this
believe
point.
so.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
yes,
you.
and I can confirm that with the developer here and the property owner, but I believe so.
I missed it, I'm sorry. Can you explain what Joey just said about the variance going away? Are you guys going to move the office?
Yes, so the intent will be once this development is completed, this parcel along Gallatin Pike will be bifurcated and the leasing office portion will be combined with that same Hollywood Kingsley developer so that the whole Canvas Apartments lot would be joined in one.
Okay, and so I apologize because I'm, again, familiar with this area, y'all, I'm sorry. I know where Solo East is. My husband used to live in Solo East, so I'm very familiar. So I know that currently you can get to the Canvas Apartments off of Lytton. So will you guys have access points off of Gallatin now once you finish the development? And then I guess your access point here where the zoning sign is near the McDonald's, will you have an access point there? I'm just...
Well, okay, so I should say that's, at this time, the rough plans for future development would be that access road that's being proposed would be the only access road on Gallatin. So the future building that may be constructed in the remainder of the site on Gallatin outlined in red would be granted an access easement in that roadway, so there wouldn't be another driveway added to Gallatin in the
So
future.
the temporary leasing office, how will people get to that? Off of Lytton? I know what you asked us for today is just a variance for this temporary office that eventually the variance will go away because you're going to move this office.
So, sorry, I shouldn't say, the office itself will be moved. This will be a permanent office, but the variance would go away because this property that the office is being constructed on would be combined with the parcel abutting it to the rear.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sorry,
No,
I was
that
not
makes
clear
sense.
on
That's all.
that.
That
I'm
was my
sorry.
question. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any additional questions? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and discuss. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with the request. It doesn't seem like a very intrusive ask, and the nature of these parcels is such that it both makes sense, and it seems to be how to handle it especially from an ingress and egress perspective of like if they're trying to get to the leasing office for the units that are going to be towards the back, it's
As
safer
someone who
and
was
better.
just over in that apartment a couple weeks, or not, I will tell you, having an ingress off of Gallatin at some point should be the goal, because everybody coming off of Lytton, it's kind of a bottleneck. So
Yeah.
I think I understand why they're doing it. That makes sense. So I'm supportive too.
And, I don't know if it matters or not, was the leasing office with some amenities like common space and gyms and other stuff?
Yeah.
motion that we approve the variance as requested based upon the applicant's demonstration of a hardship in accordance with the shape and nature of the lot.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Don't think there's any more discussion, so let's vote. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand. So we have 4 in favor and 0 opposed.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
With that, the board will be adjourned. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.